Thank you, Lisa, and good morning, everybody. Now, as we have with live webinars, sometimes we're having a few technical difficulties in the background. So we are just getting Ray Harrington on. Ray's had a few connection problems this morning, but Lisa will be able to hopefully sort all of that out, and we'll get into it. But I'll get the show on the road, and hopefully Ray will join us as we get going. So harvest weed seed control. This is a picture of myself and Ray doing one of our harvest weed seed control workshops, and I'm demonstrating the sieve and the baffle, and Ray's showing us where the material is going and the tape measure in hand. And I guess we had great attendance to these workshops, and I just guess I wanted to say it's a really interesting field, and it's more art than science. There's a lot of different opinions out there about how to set up harvesters. They're all very valuable. And they sometimes are poles apart. So this morning we are going to try and address some of these harvester setup issues, but I guess it's going to be hard to say we'll give definitive answers on everything, because in reality some things just aren't fully sorted out yet. So yeah, we'll talk you through harvester setup, and as Lisa's already introduced, it's a Weed Smart webinar, and I just put up a little slide there from Ray. I pinched it from his presentation from Denver in the US. Ray has been involved in harvest weed seed control for a long time, since he sold all of his sheep back in 1995 and realised that if he went cropping, he had to do something about his weed seeds at harvest. And so it was at that point that he started going looking for things, and led ultimately to the Harrington seed destructor. And I guess one of the bits of research which I always start this sort of discussion with is this one, and that is that Michael Walsh and John Broster, so Michael was RE, now Sydney University, John Broster, Charles Sturt University, New South Wales, they measured 5 harvesters in 2014 to see where all the weed seeds were ending up, and what they found was a disaster for harvest weed seed control. They found that half of the weed seeds were exiting in the straw fraction, a few percent in the grain tank, and then roughly half in the chaff fraction. Now, for our harvest weed seed control tools that we're using these days, 4 of them are focused on just that chaff fraction. So chaff cart, chaff deck, chaff line, and the seed impact mills, the terminator and the destructor. So they're all focused just on that chaff fraction. So if we only put half of the weed seeds in there, we're not doing a full job. So they went back to the drawing board. The following year, they got a harvester that was set up for harvest weed seed control. The harvesters in 2014, they weren't set up specifically for harvest weed seed control. They were just set up for normal harvest. When they went in 2015 and worked with a harvester that was set up for harvest weed seed control, they found that they could divert 97% of weed seeds into that chaff fraction. So really, it just goes to show that if we put our minds to it and we set the machines up well, we can achieve what we're trying to achieve. But if we don't specifically try and set the machines up, we're going to lose a lot of weed seeds out of the rotor and going out with the straw. So it is possible, but it requires specific setup. So I guess the other thing that has come to mind to me is when we think about harvest, what's our objective out there? And I think this is in priority order, but different people have different priorities. But we want to minimise our grain losses. We want to have good harvest capacity and a good, clean grain sample. Now that is where harvest used to begin and end. It was really about those 3 key factors, and now we're adding another one, weed seeds, to the mix. And so while we are harvesting our crops, and there's a lot of people expert in it, we've added another variable to the equation, which requires additional consideration, and it's not easy. Now, I'd just like to say at this point, me personally, I am not the expert here. I am just facilitating the discussion. So really, there are a lot more experts than me, and that's why I'm getting Ray Harrington on, hopefully. But the point being is that while we've always focused on those first 3 points there, adding this 4th one just requires some different thinking, and that's what we're planning on running through today. All right, so I'll keep going. I don't think I've got Ray yet. Ray, if you do come on, just chime in and let me know when you're on board. So I'm going to go through the 4 stages of harvest weed seed control, the 4 stages of getting weed seeds into the chaff stream and where you want them to go. And the first one is just getting them in the front. So and there's already been a question come up about what percentage of weed seeds go into the front of the harvester. And the answer is it depends. But essentially we're talking about generally harvesting at beer can height. And in the photo on the screen there, that was a 4-ton crop harvested, cutting the beer can in half, harvested at about 10 centimetres. And really that grower was doing that with the primary objective of getting through the stubble at seeding time. That photo was actually taken at seeding time. And so it's not just about harvest weed seed control, it is about residue management, so we can get through the residue. And some data on this from Michael Walsh of what percentage of weed seeds go in the front of the harvester. Well, it depends. So what Michael here has done is measured at the same site, but in different seasons, the height of ryegrass in various crops. And as you can see there, this line here with the hollow circles is a low yielding crop. And so this is the harvest height, and this is the percentage of weed seeds entering the front of the harvester. And so you can see that when we are down at 10 centimetres harvest height, or I think it's probably 13, which is the beer can, we can always get 80% plus ryegrass, in this case, into the front of the harvester, and close to 90 if we're harvesting very low. But if we have a lower yielding crop, like this one here, it's only a 0.6 tonne per hectare crop, we can, obviously those weed seeds can lay over, the weeds lay over, fall down, and it's hard to get them in the front. Whereas with our higher yielding crops, the weeds have to grow up for sunlight and they're standing up in the crop. So number one, harvest height, how many can you get in the front? Well, it depends. It depends on crop competition. It also depends on weed species as well. We know that wild radish is our king of seed retention and holds the pods higher. Ryegrass is probably second, and other weeds like brome grass and wild oats is less, but it's possible to capture quite a few. Now, did I hear you tune in there, Ray? Have I got you?
Yes, Peter, got some technology sorted out.
Fantastic. So as you can see, Ray, hopefully you can see the screen as well.
Yeah, I've got crop competition, yep.
Fantastic. And we've got about 40 people on live, Ray, so we've got a good audience out there. Thanks everyone for joining us. So yeah. Ray, I've made the point of Michael's research here, just from your experience, harvest height with getting weeds in the front of the harvester. What's your plan of attack there?
Yeah, pretty critical. You know, we're down to beer can height, as much as we don't want to be down there getting that much straw, but I'm afraid, as we always say, the weeds are calling the shots. We've got to go down after them. Yeah.
And I think this graph also shows that if you do have higher yielding and competitive crops, you can actually lift that harvest height up a little bit. But of course, so, you know, in that situation there, we're getting 80% plus at 20 centimetres harvest height. But I guess the grower obviously needs to be able to still get through the residue at seeding time. So there are other objectives. But it does sort of show if you have a competitive crop and the weed seeds are sitting up, there is an opportunity to lift it up a bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the competition pushes the weeds up. And Michael's Walsh work showed that at the university when he did it in plots, it actually makes the weeds express higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's another one. I mean, we have lived in fear of the prostrate weed, you know, the weed that grows horizontally along the ground and keeps its weed seeds very low, or weeds that shed at harvest. And I saw some pot trials that Michael did where he put some weeds just in pots on their own, and guess how they grew? Prostrate, flat, because they were making use of all the sunlight. And then he put weeds in pots with some wheat plants around them, exactly the same genetics of the weed seed, and they grew straight up. So I think sometimes we've seen these prostrate weeds in the field, and often it's just they're responding to their conditions rather than they actually genetically are prostrate. Okay, now there's a couple of questions already. So beer can height for a draper front. Yes, this is a draper front, but is this different with stripper fronts? And so Michael has just started doing some research on getting weed seeds in the front of the header with a stripper front with Dan Fox in New South Wales, and they did find that it is possible to capture as many weed seeds with a stripper front as it is with a draper. But when I say it is possible, in one set of trials they got the same number of weed seeds in the front with the stripper front as the draper. In another set of trials, the stripper front was a bit behind. So there's obviously a stripper front height and setup there to get them right. But yeah, stripper fronts are a possibility. And we also talked about what's the rest of this question? Doing a header setup, talked about tools, adaptations to header fronts, and I have said that I've done some workshops recently where we were talking about these lower yielding crops here and how do we get weed seeds in the front in these lower yielding crops. And I believe that there could be another engineering solution out there to help us brush the weed seeds up off the ground in lower yielding and or wide row spacing crops. But to be honest, that hasn't progressed any further yet. There is another question. Maybe we need to redo harvest height with row spacing, as low yielding with narrow rows can increase ryegrass height. And that has been done. There has been some research done with row spacing and crop competition and harvest height. And there's some ongoing research. I'm not sure if Mike Ashworth has that in his current trials as well. But as you might expect, narrow row spacing, competitive crops, higher seeding rates, yes, the weed seeds do grow higher. Okay, thank you for your questions and keep them coming in. I think I've covered the questions there, and I'm going to move on now because really I want to spend most of the time this morning focusing on the other parts of harvest weed seed control, and that is inside the harvester. So first step, getting the weeds in the front. Second step is to get the weed seeds out of the rotor. Now, Ray, I don't know if you want to share your golf ball analogy. I think it would probably be a good time.
I think what we've seen, Peter, is a huge change with the headers, where the old days, the power of the motor was a limiting factor in harvest capacity. So what we've seen now is that virtually that doubling of horsepower. And I think what we've got to be careful of now is we've got to run these machines to their cleaning capacity, not their horsepower. And if you're throwing grain out the rotor, you're actually throwing weed seeds out as well, or vice versa. And that's the challenge with the modern header.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of growers will agree there. And also on top of that, though, we do want these things to harvest as much capacity as we can without grain or weed seed loss. But there is going to be a limit.
Yeah, they are. Once they're at their capacity of their cleaning area, not their horsepower, and that's the difference. And they all differ, but you've got to learn where the cleaning capacity is. And the headers we use, their limit is the rotor, not the sieve area. And other headers are different, so you've got to learn where it is.
Yeah, okay, so understand where your limitation is. Yeah, okay. So what I've got coming up, Ray, is some slides of a red, green, and a lime green header, and their different rotors and wire and concave configurations. So let's get into it. I'll show you a few photos now, and then we'll discuss it as we go. So the first step, as we're saying, we're talking about getting the weed seeds out of the rotor. And so this is obviously a case header, and this is just your standard small wire concave. So this is often, I think, as they come from the factory, and then there are some growers that open these up and others that leave them as they are, like that. And so what do you run here, Ray? So
looking at that, we run small wire in the first one for barley, and then we start getting onto large wire, and then the grates just get wider again until the back grate, the golf ball will go out.
Yeah.
And basically the system we run with the cereals. And now the other thing we've had to do with the rotors in the case is put in what they call flats. If you shift your cursor to the right of the screen for a second, we run a pair of flats. So in other words, a pair of bars that go straight across the rotor. We put 2 of those in there, and then we go back to the first grate and we put 2 flats in there. And we go back to the last grate and we put what they call kicker bars in there, which are flat on a bit of an angle. So this has all come from the research with my case dealer mechanic and the machines he runs, and that's what we've basically done with the serial to try and get more activity in the rotor and then enable to get it out through the grates.
So can you just explain what you're thinking when you're putting in those flats and different things in the rotor? What is your thinking? What are you trying to achieve?
We've got to bash the straw up, because suddenly we're down beer can height. You know, if we're just taking the heads off, we wouldn't have to do any of this, but we've got to bash the straw up enough to get the grain to get out of the straw, because it's only in the whole machine for 3 seconds. And that's the point of it, trying to work the straw to get the grain to come through the straw mat that's going through it.
Yeah.
So it's only in the first part of the rotor for 1.5 seconds. So you've got to try and disturb that thing so you haven't got a mat running through there with grain sitting on the wrong side of the mat of straw.
Yeah. And so you would have one of these, that's a small wire concave there, and then when you get to here, you would have...
We go large wire.
So bigger wires with bigger gaps, aren't they?
Yep. They're called large wire.
Yep. And then
we go larger again in the grate.
Yep.
And then we've got one right on the back. This is for cereal. The one right on the back is, like I say, big enough to put a golf ball in through.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's have a look. I think I've got a photo of the golf ball one here. So this is the next section behind the concave on the case header, and this is the standard grates, I think, isn't it, Ray?
Yeah, that one's standard. And we even go wider with another one that's only got one wire in the middle for the back grate. So that one's the first grate, and the second grate, where you move your cursor to the right, we've actually only got one wire in there.
One wire in the middle, but these bars here are the same distance apart.
Yeah. So these are all off the shelf. But I think the real key to all the listeners is you've got to get the balance between the amount of material your machine you can get onto the sieves. You've got to get a balance between how much you can get on the sieves and have your sieve cleaning area working maximum, and then you get maximum disturbance in the rotor.
Yeah, and that's something that everyone is concerned about, isn't it? They say, oh, but then we'll overload our sieves. So it is finding that balance, eh?
And the only one that can do it is the farmer. He's got to work it out for himself. And I think you've got to be prepared to make these changes. We all know it's a pain in the butt, but you've got to be prepared to make the changes and understand what's happening. And then you get the balance between the two, and that gets you up to your peak capacity regardless of your horsepower.
Yeah. So another question's come in, Ray, with light crops, so low yielding crops, would you change the concaves in the front to just having 2 small wires instead of a small wire then a large wire?
Yeah, because with this modern header, not using bars, not using straight across bars, just using those things like your fist, I think you've got to have them smaller, because there's not enough thrashing power. And I'd be actually looking in my light crops at putting more flats or those Gordon bars in, because you haven't got enough material in there, because the straw actually is thrashed on the grain in this system, not like your old conventionals where it was actually up against rub bars, where nowadays it uses the straw to actually get the grain out of the head. Yep. So I'd go right up the front of my rotor in light crop and put some flats or Gordon bars in. Yeah,
okay. Yep. So that answers that question. So I guess, like you say, and I think that's the thing. There's not one setup for everyone, is there? It's conditions and it's crop yields and it's crop type as well, of course.
Yeah, yeah. And then you get some wheat that's hard to thrash, you know, and you've got to do it. You've got to really do it in the first. You've got to really do it in the first concave. Yeah.
Righto. Excellent, Ray. All right, let's change colours now. Oh, hang on. I'll just, before I do that, we're just in the back of the machine now. This case has the internal chopper. And I think just as a general rule, everything I've heard, and Ray, you obviously comment, is that people that switch to harvest weed seed control with case headers and they're looking at ones with the chaff fraction, the internal chopper is a long way in front of the internal beater. Is that what you would say as well, Ray?
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to have a chopper in mine. I had a chopper in my last header, but at the moment I haven't got a chopper in it. But it's certainly a lot better.
Yeah.
Especially with the modern chopper now, with a case now, they've changed the beater to a chopper. They don't use that other style of chopper.
Right.
They actually just replaced the beater with a chopper with the same drive system.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing that you always point to here, Ray, is to look at this where the paint has worn off from the straw throwing up here. So that gives us a good indication of how to set up our baffles and so on later on. Yeah,
well, you've got to get that straw to fly over top of the baffle if you're using one of the harvest weed seed systems.
Yep, yep. Sounds like you need a drink of water, Ray. All right, let's change colours. So we're into the green ones now. S-Series John Deere I've got here. And in this case, we've got the standard small wire, 31 wire concave. Now, this is something where I was recently doing a workshop at a John Deere dealership, and we had a bit of a disagreement. To be perfectly honest, the guys I was disagreeing with knew a whole lot more about headers than I ever will. And so they really knew their game. But essentially, they were really adamant that John Deere's really want to run with these 31 wire concaves and never take them out. And that's one concave for everyone. And so that's one side of the opinion. And then the other side is I then went to a grower who was running this setup. He had a 24 wire concave over here, I think it was, and then two 16s large wire concaves here. So there's another 16 behind that. So really opening it up. And this guy had a seed terminator on the back. I was on another farm yesterday who was running something very similar to this. And so threshing it a little bit harder here and then really trying to get the grain out here. And I don't know what you think, Ray. It's interesting discussion, this one. I think going back, the John Deere guys are really saying we want the 31 wire in there so that we are really using that straw to thresh against the grain, was what I could understand. And if we take too many wires out, we just don't get a hard enough threshing at the front. Whereas the growers are sort of saying, yes, but we want to get grain out of the first section of the, you know, of the rotor. We want to get grain out of the concave, so we want to open it up. So yeah, so I think this is one where this is a discussion, and we're not. I don't think there's a hard and fast answer here. Ray will probably give one, but I think
Peter, Peter, it's all about try it. It's all about try it and have a go. Now, if you look at the concave on the left, the small wire, you can just take half the wires out. Just take the half the wires out and try it. It's have a go. Who dares wins. If we just plod along as we are, we know we're not going to change. We've got totally different crop conditions all over the world, and I'm sure the John Deere blokes are working it all out. But suddenly we do need to get those weed seeds out of the rotor. It's simple. If the whole harvest system's changed where the weeds are calling the shots, we can't do what we used to do. And I would definitely try this on the John Deere. You don't have to buy the concave. You just take every second wire out of the one you already got. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And well, that's how we started.
If people are trying it, Ray, what are they looking for? I mean, it's tricky. It's really hard to measure where the weed seeds are going. It's almost impossible. In fact, that research that Mike Walsh and John Broster did, they had sacks and socks attached to all different parts of the header, and then students sifting through chaff for months. You know, we can't be doing that. So what do you think people are looking for? If they try something, what are they looking for to make sure they're doing the right thing?
What your monitors tell you. What your monitors tell you, your losses through your rotor compared to the losses through your sieves. Like I know with the header I run, my rotor losses will come up first. So you muck around until you get the balance, and then you can push the capacity of the machine up so they're both balanced. That's what we've got to try and do, get our losses to balance.
Yeah. Rightio.
Some have got different sieve cleaning area to the other. So you've got to try and run the capacity of the rotor and the capacity of the sieves and get them matched and bring them up together. And be at the limit of the two when they're together. Otherwise, you're working with the weakest link. You're either throwing it out the sieves or throwing it out the rotor. Now, for harvest weed seed, we don't want to be throwing it out the rotor. We throw it over the sieves. We throw it over the sieves that goes into the harvest weed seed system.
Yeah.
Except for your windrow burn, well, it doesn't matter there.
And I think that's what's happened. We did a lot of windrow burning, and this stuff didn't matter. But
that's
now
right.
With chaff and straw, it matters now. Okay, well, let's keep going. The next section of the John Deere is this. This is the John Deere grates, and these are a bit more closed up than the other headers. You're not going to get a golf ball through there. And I know, Ray, I've been on the road with you where you say you would get a hammer and you would knock out every second one of those fingers. That's pretty extreme, and I don't know if anyone has, but what are your thoughts?
I would only do the back grate and be prepared to sacrifice a back grate. I'd start at the back and do a bit and see what happened. You don't go and do them all. You start at the back of the grate. You start at the right-hand side of the screen, and you might take the first 6 inches out of the grate or something like that.
Yeah.
You got to be prepared. Got to be prepared to see if you can improve them.
Yeah, I think the John Deere guys would be.
They'd be mortified.
It would be mortified, absolutely messing.
They'd be mortified.
And whether or not people do that, I think the point is it's just that point that we are trying to get our weed seeds out of there. We've got to make sure they come out.
Yeah. It's a whole new ball game. You know, if we didn't have harvest weed seed, we wouldn't have to worry about all this. We'd just go harvesting.
Yeah. Well, here we go, Ray. We've had Heath put a comment in. He says, I run a John Deere 9650 and punched out every second finger of the last two grates. Worked well.
Well, thank you for that.
There you go. Maybe if the John Deere mechanics are listening in, they might tell their side of the story as well, which is all good. Like, I'm not trying to suggest that we know everything and so on, but I think it's just a discussion that we're all trying to have to try and get the best out of these machines.
Well, Pete, this is the best part about this webinar. Suddenly we've got someone that's tried it.
Yep.
And got a result, so we all work on this together. And this webinar gets us right across Australia working together.
Absolutely.
And it's good to hear, because that's been my view when I've looked at them, but I've never ever owned a green one, so I was very guarded in my comments.
Yeah, you're never guarded in your comments, right? Rightio. Let's change colour again. Now we're on the Class machine, the Class Lexion. I was out, took these photos yesterday. I was out measuring canola harvest losses with a fellow, and incidentally, this machine performed extremely well. These are different again. So this is the side view looking into the concave. This has a horizontal drum, sort of a concave, and then feeding the material into two rotors. And so different again, different sort of threshing system. And then if we look into the back of the machine, we can see there's the pre-cleaner sieve up the front and then the large sieve area at the back. And you can see above that is a roof. And so the twin rotors sit above that roof. So in terms of harvest weed seed control, these machines keep chaff and straw completely separate already. So these are a dream to set up in terms of separating chaff and straw. They've done it for us. I don't know, Ray, if you've got any other comments about the class machines, about any of the concave or any of the setup on them.
No, well, I've had no experience with the class, but go back to the slide before. Has that got a bar running fore and after the machine? Has that got a long bar like we used to have? Because I've never actually been in the guts of a class. And I'm looking at it there.
I think it has got the long bars, yeah, long threshing.
Yeah, well, that's part of what my comments were earlier about putting the bars that run right across the face of the concaves, which is, you can buy the Gordon bars and that for our sort of Australian conditions, where it's obviously got more aggression and doesn't allow so much straw on straw contact for separation.
Mm. Yeah.
So I must go to the trouble of having a look inside of guts for class, because I'll learn something.
Yeah, I'm always learning something, and if someone out there has a class header and they'd like to just put a message in their questions box, I'll see that pop up just to confirm if we're on the right track there. Yeah, so look, these machines, they thresh it hard there, then they've got 2 rotors, so they've got lots of rotor area and they've got lots of sieve. On paper, I think these are fantastic machines for harvest weed seed control. Other people would be able to comment, and everyone has their own sort of make of harvester. The guy whose farm I was on yesterday was originally from Scotland, and he used these machines up there and knew the machines, which is why he purchased one here. And I guess that's sort of a lot of way a lot of people run. They sort of get locked into a particular make of machine because they know it and it suits them, and then they get that to work well. So yeah, we're not trying to suggest everyone switches to class headers, but I think if you do have one and you are setting up on harvest weed seed control, the straw and chaff separation is pretty well done for you. Okay, now another variable, Ray, rotor speed. Now this is another one where there are opinions that are poles apart, and as I said at the beginning, this is more art than science. There's no hard and fast rules. So there's 2 sort of opinions I've heard. One is, let's slow the rotor down, we'll keep the material in the rotor longer so we can thresh it a bit longer. Or the other, for harvest weed seed control, is run the rotor a bit faster so we get extra centrifugal force to throw weed seeds out of that rotor. What do you think, Ray?
My comments are the style of rotor here, where you've got the parallel bars. The parallel bars will do more thrashing at lower speed, but we tend to keep the speed up. And the limiting factor with your speed is the cracking grain. That's the big thing. You've still got to have that grain quality is the big key. So that's the balance. Yeah. Extra centrifugal force, well, you've still got to stir it up, and get the grain to work its way through the mat that's going through there. You know, the mat's bloody 10 or 15, 20 mil thick that's going through. You've got to get the grain to come to the outside of that mat. But we don't tend to worry too much about rotor speed, other than keep it up and don't have damage to the grain, I guess, is how we work.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of different things here. A lot of farmers say, look, they just set it according to the sample and what it says in the book. I know Lance Turner, who's done a lot of stuff with us, Ray. Lance often talks about running his rotor a bit faster to get that centrifugal force. Andrew Messina, on the other hand, with his case machines, talked about just setting it for the book and not really a big factor for him. So once again, not a hard and fast one, but another thing to try, I guess.
Well, ours is mostly to the heat of the day. Crank it up in the morning and got to thrash it a bit hard, and then as it gets hotter, you slow it down a bit. I think that's more ours is to do with the moisture content and the heat, particularly in canola. Yeah.
And here's another question come through. Instead of rotor speed, would changing the cage vanes help?
Yeah, well, they go hand in glove. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. When it's cold and damp,
one thing changes another.
when it's cold and damp and you want to thrash it all up a bit, it's a bit quicker and tighter.
Yeah.
It's all about trying to break the straw up to get into the shorter lengths to get the grain to go through the straw mat that's going through. It's going through like a bit of carpet.
Yeah.
And the real thing we've got to remember, it's 3 seconds. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, it's gone. The job's done.
Yep. Righto, Ray. Okay, so we need to keep moving. We're getting through it. We've got about 20 minutes to go. And next step is step 3, keeping the weed seeds in the chaff stream. So we've got the weed seeds out of the rotor. They're on the sieve. How do we make sure we keep those weed seeds in the chaff stream? Now, this is a sort of schematic diagram that Nick Berry drew a long time ago, just the inner workings of a harvester with the rotor here, the pre-cleaning sieve here, the main sieve there. I mean, not all harvesters have this in here. The case doesn't have that roof. That's more like a class or something.
Yep,
and then we're talking about a separator baffle back here, which we'll get to in a moment. But the point being, we have our weed seeds sitting in this area here. They're moving towards the back of the harvester. I guess that we don't want to blow them hard up into that straw stream and blow them over the baffle. So there is a bit of a balance with wind speed. We obviously have to have enough wind on so that we're still getting a good sample and so on. But we don't want to have so much wind on that we can blow weed seeds right over our baffle into that straw stream. What are your thoughts there, Ray?
So for wind speed, it's about the correct speed for the sample. Nothing to do with getting it into a harvest weed seed system. You can't compromise sample. So Chris and Nick's work said, and I can use my cursor, I don't know whether it's shifting on your screen, that gap from there to there.
Where are you pointing?
Go to the beginning of the separator baffle.
Yeah.
No, right down the back. Yeah. You go from there to the sieve. You go from vertical from the back of the sieve. It comes straight down. That's got to be 300, 350, because Chris and Nick did the work, and where your yellow line's flowing above the sieve from left to right, the weed seeds don't go any higher in the chaff stream than 300 at the normal wind for cleaning the grain. So that's why you've got to have that baffle back above the sieves, and then let the air with the blue line go over the air that's got no weed seeds in the blue line, and the yellow line continues on and goes down into whatever you're doing, chaff cart or whatever. It's critical that baffle has 300 to 350 gap all the way around the back of the sieves as it comes around the corner. So as you come around the corner with the baffle, that's it. It's got to be 350 there as well.
Yeah.
You can't choke it off there. So there's actually an arc. It comes around from the top of your separator baffle. There's an arc of 300, 350 around, so you don't choke it off. Otherwise, you interfere with your sample. And that's just come from practical experience and Chris and Nick's work.
Now we're going to have a look at a few baffles now. I've got some photos of some different baffles. Now some of them finish about here, like you say, they're sort of in line, directly above the rear of the sieve. Some of them finish there. Other baffles finish back here. I know Rod Messina's baffle on the case, just more of a chaff, straw spreading cover, finishes sort of more so here. And so there's some different sort of baffles out there. So let's have a look at a few and discuss each one as we go. So where are we? Baffles are baffling. That's what I always say. This is you and I describing the whole idea, Ray, and you've got your tape measure here talking about your 350 mils. And so here's one baffle. This is Lee Bryan's. He's got a MAV chopper. I think it's a case 7120. It's something very similar, if it's not exactly that.
I had to find a bit of water, Peter.
Oh, good on you, Ray. Yeah, so this is a MAV chopper, and as you can see with this one, so he's got what he's called a tarp liner. So this is chaff lining, but it's a tarpaulin sort of a chute. And he's got a curved edge on his baffle, but as you can see, it's not finishing directly above the sieves. It is finishing sort of behind the sieves a bit, but probably a couple of 100 mil, I would guess, above the height of the sieve. So that's one. Here's another one in an older case 2388. This is more like what you were talking about, Ray, where it's directly above the rear of the sieve and sort of 350 mils. I mean, you've had a lot of experience with the 2388, Ray. Does that look about like what you would do?
Yeah,
in one
but
of those?
it looks a bit choked as it goes around the corner. Just in there, it looks to be not the same distance between the vertical line. It looks to be choked off there.
So if we choke that off, we increase our wind speed through here, and
that's right.
Or increases the pressure here, and then things can fly over the top. Yeah.
So this gap, the vertical gap where your cursor is now, that's got to stay the same right around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks a bit, and it might be right. It's hard to tell on the on the slide, but it's important if you've got that same clearance all the way around.
Once again, they've put a bit of pipe on the front to have that curved sort of edge. Here's the Rod Messina design. This is a little bit hard to photograph these things. This is a case 8230. So this is where they just have a straw spreader. So this one's got an internal chopper in the header, and then the straw spreader. Now they have a chaff deck. You can see the chaff deck. Chaff cart. They have a chaff cart. You can see the chaff cart elevator belt there. And so in this case, their spreaders are just up a notch. They've cut an extra notch to just lift them up a bit. So normally the case straw spreaders just sit down in a bit lower, but in this case with the chaff cart, they've got them up a bit. So this is just a cover. It completely covers the bottom half of the straw spreaders and then angles forward. And in their case, this only sits about 50 mil higher than the height of the sieve, but it is quite a way back from the sieve. But remembering that they have an internal chopper which really throws the straw high up into the roof and into the straw spreaders. But that's been very successful, and there's been a lot of people copy that one. I know that some growers that are chaff lining with these, they have their straw spreaders all the way down, and another farmer I saw a couple of days ago, he had a chaff cut and he managed to have his spreaders all the way down, and they have their baffle, so theirs ends up sticking up here a bit more, if you like, because the straw spreaders are in the down position, and theirs is more like about 200 mils above the rear of the sieve, but still back a bit.
I think one of the little asides from that slide, Peter, is put your cursor down where the baffle's bolted onto we did that to ours last year. That improves the case straw spreader.
All right.
Because it actually turns it into a big air pump.
Right.
Because you block the bottom half, it actually turns the straw spreader into an air pump where you've got it bolted there. Improves them out of sight.
There you go.
Because the straw and that's trying to get out of it instead of going out where you want it to go. And we put one up the back of ours last year and improved it out of sight.
Excellent.
So that's just a little aside that's happened.
Righto.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. All right, we'll keep going. Here's a John Deere header. I'm not 100% sure of the model. And you can see that they've got that inspection window there, and in this case the baffle's sitting just a little behind it. Now this is one without an overshot beater, so this has a single beater back up here somewhere, whereas I think if I go to the next slide, this is a better photo. So this is a John Deere header with an overshot beater, so it's got two beaters, one up here, another one back there, curved front on the baffle. This is the baffle supplied by primary sales when you buy chaff decks. You can see it's got chaff decks and a very narrow, I think it's only 50 odd mil gap between the baffle and the overshot beater there.
Yeah.
Now, one grower I know who has a seed terminator who had a similar baffle managed to wrap some canola stalks around here and smash up his baffle and his beater. He did a good job of it. It was quite amazing how wrapping some green material around a beater could actually bend it so much.
Yeah.
And so he's actually opened his up a bit. He's made it more like a 100 mil gap there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess this is, that's nothing's going to, it's going to be very good at separating chaff and straw in this system where you have this overshot beater, all the straw is travelling over the top of it. There's very little opportunity to mix the chaff from here with the straw up there.
Peter, just shift your cursor down. Shift your cursor down. See that plate there?
Yeah.
That plate there, that one there? I've been looking in the John Deeres and I would actually take that plate out. Which
well,
means
a lot of
then
people
you
are making a short one, Ray. It's
yeah, well, that's
yeah.
Yep. Same on the same page, yep.
Yeah.
And that means you can bring your baffle up a bit. Because then you've got that 350 gap between the back of the plate and the baffle.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got the curl, and that, that'd be good. Shorten that plate up. Shorten that plate up, which means you can bring the baffle forward. So then it'd come up to nearly up to where that door is.
Yeah.
You bring the thing forward, and you have that 350 curl around the back, 350 from the back of that where the plate's taken off back to the baffle.
Yeah.
And that gives you don't have to take your spreader so far back.
Yeah.
Because they're taken back on the slides. You can actually bring it all forward.
Yeah. And also, I think there's some John Deeres where they have some straw spinners back here instead of a chopper. And I remember you helped modify one in New South Wales, Ray, and they did exactly that. They made this plate a lot shorter. That just gave them a little bit more room to fit in a chaff line and shoot before they got to the spreaders. Yeah. Okay, there's some more questions coming in. We'll get to them in just a second. Yep, okay, so that's my last baffle photo there. But now a question is, in a New Holland 9.90, a client has been told that if they tried a chaff line, they might end up with too much straw going through the chaff rather than through the chopper. Does he need a baffle, and where does it need to fit? Now, I'm sorry I didn't have any photos of the New Holland headers. It's for no reason other than I just didn't have any. But the New Holland headers, from my experience, there's two main variations there. Some of them have that PSD belt, which is a short conveyor belt that leads out of the top of the rotor. There's a short conveyor belt that helps carry the straw to the chopper, and then others don't have that. Now, from what I've seen, Ray, where you do have a PSD belt, you don't really need a baffle because the straw is being carried well over the top already. But the ones without a PSD belt, there is a need for a baffle. Is that your understanding, Ray?
Yeah. Because it virtually splits. It splits it with the PSD belt. It's split anyway. But then you've probably got to deflect it. You've got to deflect it. The baffle will deflect it into terminator and destructor. It'll deflect it into that. It'll deflect it into the chaff line chutes. So you've still got to have some sort of deflector to get it back down into the receptor or back onto the chaff cart belt. So you're really still looking at using a baffle to turn the material down, because you've got to get it down behind the header, either into a chaff line or onto a belt or onto the belts that go on the wheel tracks. So you're still looking at using a baffle to get an end result further down. It's actually down behind the drawbar of the headers where you've got to deliver the material.
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to do without photos, and sorry about that. But I was looking at one the other day that didn't have a PSD belt, and he was setting up for chaff lining, and he was going to put in a pretty short baffle, really. It didn't need to go too far into the back of the harvester on that one. But a bit hard to cover now, but I think you'll get the picture there.
I think, Pete, if you don't take the baffles forward of the back of the sieve, because once you do that, if they go forward like we did way in the beginning, you get a damp damp evening and the straw will sit on that baffle.
Mm.
So we were on this slide you've got. Our baffle was up nearly where the O is on overshot originally.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, seriously, it used to cover the light up on the old 2388. And then we slowly came back, and we're back now to the back of the sieves, and it really is just a deflector to do something with the straw, the chaff, after you've got it off the sieves. It's what you do after where the baffle comes in. And I imagine the one with the PSD belt's still going to have something to deliver the chaff after the sieves back down behind the drawbar, the header, into whatever system you're going to use.
More to push it down. And I guess the other thing
or
to
to
remember
deliver
is
the chaff to
one
a
of the
receptacle.
things one of the things we've got here with these, particularly with the John Deere chopper, but all of them, they suck air. And so if you don't have that cover on there, you might do everything right up here and the weed seeds get to here, and then there's a big vacuum cleaner over here just sucking weed seeds into the chopper and spreading them out again. So that's a big part of it, is it's as much just, and so then comes the whole story about airflow, which we probably don't have time for now, but I guess we do have to be aware these headers need to breathe, and that's where the real balance comes. If we put a baffle on, we do have to really be very careful to check grain losses and make sure we don't mess up the harvester in terms of its breathing. The other point I'd like to make is that some people with these baffles, where if they're going to clog up, it's going to be on green canola, and all I say to them is you just have to have the ability to take them off and keep harvesting, because there's people that have torn their hair out trying to keep going with the baffle and green canola, and so really you're going to compromise the job, of course, if you have to take the baffle out, but you do just have to keep harvesting too. Now, a couple of questions coming in, Ray. If the baffle is choked off, do we decrease the airflow? Do you want to explain that air pressure?
No, we can't. We can't.
No, I think he's saying we don't want to, but if we do choke it off too much,
you lose your sample, Pete.
Yeah.
You lose your sample if you interfere with the airflow. It's critical. It's critical to have high volume. Cleaning air is high volume, low pressure.
Yeah.
So it's critical that you don't interfere. And you can see there, I think this one's choked at the back. So this height is irrelevant because it's choked further back, but I may be wrong, but just looking at it. So you've got to have that curl around the back so the area that air's going through doesn't get choked off.
So if that chokes off there, we create an area of high pressure air here, don't we, Ray?
Yeah, and the sample goes. And the sample's gone.
The sample's gone, and also we're risking blowing weed seeds over here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we need to keep moving now. Just in terms of the follow-up comment to the New Holland question, Andrew has told us that he's installed a West Oz chaff line kit to his CR 8.90, and it comes with an extension to the beta grate to throw straw to the chopper. I'll have to think about that for a moment, but certainly let's not go into it now, but just to know that there's certainly for New Holland there is some baffle kits out there. Okay, I want to finish off with the last bit, and this is the 6 harvest weed seed control tools, which we're not talking about in any great detail, but we're talking about 4 of them mostly here. And as we said at the beginning, we didn't used to have to worry about harvester setup with windrow burning. We do now, because now with chaff cart like this one, chaff lining like these chaff lining chutes we have here, or the tarp line by Lee Bryan. There's the West Oz boiler making chaff liner, chaff deck, or the impact mills. We're all focused on the chaff. And so I think I just really wanted to make the comment that with harvest weed seed control, certainly I've been guilty of really just talking about these bits on the back and forgot that there's these other 3 stages in front of this, which I've learned a lot from Ray and Lance and Andrew Messina and Rod Messina and others travelling around with them. But really what we've talked about today is all the bits before we get to this and making sure we get those weed seeds where we want them. And Ray, I think it might be just good time to finish off. You spoke to the guys from De Bruin yesterday, and you've got a little bit to share about some developments that are going on with HSD.
Yeah, so we've got new models out, pre-production prototype for this year. So we now can cover the header ranges from class 6 to class 10. And the latest drive systems now, and I had the head engineer fitting one up for me yesterday, and we're looking at somewhere between a 38 and a 34, 28 and a 34% reduction in power use with exactly the same mills. And we've also improved the mills now. The word's gone out of my head. We've added more material in the mills where the wear is, and it's like an egg timer. And
so those pre-production models you're talking about, Ray, they're mechanical belt-driven ones?
They're mechanical drive, yep.
Yep.
So hydraulic drive still available for the big class 10s and that. And we've run these. One's already been running finished harvest south of Paris, and there's 2 running now in the US. And we ran the mechanical drive last year as the startup, and so we put more out in pre-production this year. So that goes right through from class 6 right through to class 10.
Yeah, fantastic. So some big developments there. As I said to you yesterday when we were talking about this, Ray, a couple of years ago we thought we were getting close to this thing being developed, and then we're finding that we're getting more and more development coming. So fantastic.
I think, Peter, evolution is the word. We'll probably see all this change into the future as well. And the name's just come back into my head. It's called the Acropolis Mill.
Yep.
The change of shape of the bar on the rotor. But we'll see this all improve as more and more gets used. And just think of the first header that came out compared to what we got now.
Absolutely, yeah. And also, Ray, HSD had a pretty dodgy year last year with lots of problems, and they've all been addressed, and early indications look pretty good for guys that have started up this way, and also the machine that did a couple of 100 hours in France.
Yeah, well, that's why we've gone over to the off season. They've sorted out the bearing carriage issue and got tricked by going to hard ox as the best wearing material. As soon as you welded it, it lost 80% of its Fresnel. So it wore quicker than the old standard ones I'm using that do 600, 700 hours. So
yeah.
we just got tricked by going to the harder material.
Yep. And I know, talking to the Seed Terminator guys, they also went to the Northern Hemisphere to do their testing. They went to Canada, had a machine do a couple of 100 hours up there. So they're very happy with their wear rates and reliability as well. They've opened up the grates, well, I don't know if you call them grates, but the screens within the mill, and believe that they've reduced the power and maintained the weed seed kill with their testing. And so, yeah, Seed Terminator, once again, still in development but, you know, addressing more issues as they come along, and yeah, once again doing a couple of 100 hours at least, I think, in Canada without any problems up there. So we are getting very close to the point where we really hope these machines are extremely reliable. Now, we obviously know that's what a lot of growers want, to destroy these weed seeds as they exit the harvester. It's been a huge road to get to that point, and we really feel like we're getting very close now, Ray.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And look, if we didn't have herbicide resistance, we wouldn't be mucking around with this. But, you know, Australia does lead the world. Gee, there's more harvest weed seed management on my farm than there is outside of Australia. So, yeah, you know, the Australian farmer's just so far in front of what's going on. It's really good.
Yep, excellent. And where am I? Do I have one more slide? Oh, okay, I've got a couple more slides. One is, if you're interested in all of this, which you obviously are because you've tuned in this morning, Condon Group did a research report on comparing HSD and Terminator, but also on all of the harvest weed seed control tools. Now, normally you have to pay $100 for that research report, but we use some WeedSmart funds to purchase the report and put it on the WeedSmart website. So it is there, available for you to download free of charge. So a very good resource for you to look at harvest weed seed control. Ben White Josh Gemelli and others did a fantastic job putting it together. Very conclusive report on harvest weed seed control. And I think I have another slide. That's my last one, Ray. Do something. And farmers are doing something. We're seeing really good adoption of lots of different harvest weed seed control tools, particularly chaff lining. That's the one that's sort of come in and taken over from windrow burning as the cheap entry level. But of all the tools, we're seeing a lot of people using harvest weed seed control. So fantastic, as you say, Australian farmers leading the world. They're adopting the practices. We have 6 of them to choose from, and we're also learning a lot about how to set the harvesters up. So with that, I'm going to finish off this morning. We're at the end of our hour. Ray, any concluding remarks?
Yeah, it's just so cheap now. You talk about chaff lining. Why wouldn't you be chaff lining for $500 or $600 and get started there, and you'd be way in front.
Yep, absolutely. I was out with a farmer the other day. He spent $128 on a piece of plastic and another $100 on some steel, and he was chaff lining and done a beautiful job of making a chute. So yeah, that's a good entry level. And then a lot of growers are very happy to invest in right up to the impact mill technology, you know, as the ultimate as well. So every level is covered. Yep. Well, Ray, thanks again. Always good to spend time with you and learn from you. And I'm sure that a lot of other people have learnt a lot along the way as well. I've had a question from Marty. Marty, you can listen to this again. We've recorded it, and it will be up on the WeedSmart website in a day or so. And we'll share that link on Twitter, so that if you know anyone who might like to listen to it, you can share it with them, or they can find it on Twitter. So yeah. Thank you very much, Ray. Thanks for your time. And yeah, thanks for joining me, and it's been a great session.
Not a problem, Pete. And thanks to those that joined in, and have a good harvest.
Yeah, absolutely. Harvest has started up this way where I am. I know that a lot of the country isn't having a good one. We're having a ripper. So it's really exciting to be out in amongst it. But thanks, everyone. We'll see you for another WeedSmart webinar down the track. And meanwhile, stay in tune with everything that WeedSmart's doing. There's some good new stuff on the website, and obviously lots of things shared on Twitter regularly, and the WeedSmart podcast every 2 weeks. So yeah, thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for listening. Bye.